Shafe, before we get to Nebraska, what do you think? You got a lot of eyeballs, man. You got good foot traffic. What do you think about the local guys? Do you have them in tiers? Is it just an all good group, or it's like let's get that out of the way, because you did have a pretty efficient summer, I think, in terms of getting eyeballs on all the top guys locally.
So do you mean just for the 25 class?
Yeah.
So I would probably break it out where Christian Jones and Chase Lofton I would put sort of your 1-2, and then maybe have your first break right there. And then after that,
so different than Tyson Terry, or do we forget about Tyson?
So I was about to address that. So with Tyson, I kind of want to include him in that first group. I kind of also want to just put him in his own tier. I feel good about Tyson. I just, for some reason, it's harder when you're an interior defensive lineman to be as explosive sometimes as what I think Chase Lofton can be and will be with Millard South, certainly. And then with Christian, I think a lot of it has to do if he has such a unique athleticism that he's going to bring to that position. It's just a little harder for interior defensive linemen. And that's not to say that I haven't seen Tyson Terry completely wreck someone's entire game plan. I have. But I don't know that I'm quite ready to include him with the other two, but I'm also not. It's not like a big gap there. So it's like it's a very short drop to number 3. And then I think there is a little bit of a gap between him and then what comes after. I should have had a class, not the class necessarily, but the state pulled up, because I'm going to forget some people. You've got your Millard North guys probably slide in after that. And then you just kind of continue on down the list, I guess, if you will.
Dave, I wonder about Tyson Terry's recruitment a little bit. Like, do you think it would have taken off more if he didn't commit so early? Like, would he have gotten more run like some of these other guys have?
Maybe. He also, and maybe you guys have a different thought on this, he doesn't really strike me as someone who is particularly concerned about what the camp viewpoint of him would be, or whether he gets the empty offers or anything like that. I think he knew where he was going to go pretty early. I think he had a pretty good relationship with this staff almost immediately. I remember talking to him at the Steve Warren event in January of last year, and January of 23, so well before he had even committed, and just walking away from that, like, his impression early on of that coaching staff. They had that event for the in-state kids almost right after Matt Rule got here. He seemed pretty locked in on what Nebraska wanted to do. I think the biggest thing was they initially liked him on the offensive line, and he wanted to make it known that he wanted to play defense. So once that all kind of got squared away, I never really saw him going anywhere else, and I don't think he did either. And so I don't know that there was a reason for him to hold off, or that more offers would have followed, or that he would have done camps or gone on random visits, or the things that you there's things you have to do to build your offer list. And I don't think Tyson Terry was interested in doing those things, because ultimately those offers don't really reflect what your recruitment is anyways.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think with Iowa, because I think it would have been Nebraska, Iowa, and K-State, and I think it was a little different with each. Iowa was putting defensive guys in the pros, right? But he also kind of knew there was a little bit of an inkling that, hey, man, you could be an all-conference offensive lineman too. So he's like, with K-State, it was he loved the culture and, the teaching. Like it's they're good at what they do. And then, Nebraska was just Nebraska. So I think with him, it was always interesting. And I think he wanted to stay close to where his family could see him play too. Which
family was a big part of this.
Huge family, and so I think that was important too.
So Shafe, as I'm going through sort of this 2025 Nebraska class here, is there? You mentioned the Millard North guys, Muberry and Vermas. Obviously, we forget about Rayberg a lot, who just committed to Wyoming pretty recently. Is there anybody else in the class kind of like Tyson Terry where you're like, hey, if they had played the game a little bit more, they may have had other options? Because I always just wonder about that, because we heard a lot about it with some of the guys in last year's class where it's like, they're not a camp guy or whatever.
Oh, like Cotton, maybe?
Yeah, and I just wonder, like, are there any guys that you look at and you're like, hey, the tape reflects something that their options don't currently?
I just wrote about it last night, or I talked with Christian Jones briefly to kind of get a gauge as to what he was going to do in terms of this upcoming weekend, because he had talked about doing a visit somewhere, and he said he has no plans of being anywhere, and that was a Monday night. So we'll see if anything changes. But you go to write the story and you look at it, he really only has 18 offers. Like he hasn't necessarily built up like the big offer list that we've seen from the top player in the state in recent years, in part because, again, he wasn't, as a sophomore, out there politicking and campaigning to get offers or going to camps or doing these different things. I remember he had transferred over from Burke to Westside and had this quote about how he wasn't worried about anything that wasn't just learning what he was supposed to be doing at a new school. And so I think for the kids in Nebraska to accumulate large offers, you sort of have to play a little bit of a game. You have to take some random visits sometimes. I don't know how, and I don't want to step on toes here, I also don't know how committable a third of these offers are, or if they're coming from actual members of the coaching staff, or if it's a recruiting staff thing, or what it is. But you'll see, like, Miami come in with some offers. Other than Chase Lofton, I don't know that Miami was pursuing anybody. And now Christian Jones had talked about maybe taking a visit there, but they offered some other kids in state. I don't know how realistic those offers really were for them to be able to go play there. So I think the way offers have gone out and the significance of them are very different now, 4 years after COVID had sort of started, than maybe where it was pre-COVID. It's a different thing to me altogether. I don't put near as much stock in the who offered that guy as much as I do now. Okay, where is he taking the visits? Who's he actually, like, you really got to parse through it. And I have to do a better job of sharing that info for my subscribers, because there's just some offers out there that I just don't think have actual inherent value to the people that are listing them on their profiles.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that confuses a lot of people that try and follow recruiting, but maybe aren't in it to the same extent. So I guess sort of my question would be, if you have to play the game to get the offers, but a lot of times the offers don't actually mean anything, then what's the point of playing the game?
Well, the idea is that someone sees that you got an offer from this big school and they're like, well, I got to take a look at this kid. So it's always the idea where if it looks like you're being recruited, then there's going to be someone who's like, well.
But don't the other places know you're not actually, like, that they're not real offers?
I don't know. I don't know how well known it is. I don't know. The coaches talk, but I don't know that you have connections to every school around the country. And the other thing is, you might just like the kid. I mean, you might put the film on and be like, all right, well, I see that school A offered, and I don't know exactly that he can go there, but I'm interested, so I'm going to put my hat in the ring, that kind of thing.
Schaefer, let me fast forward or go to Nebraska here real quick. With Coach Knighton, he was on there the other day, and he brought up a couple of young defensive linemen that I think really make this thing interesting. Not only does it kind of lend credence to what you've been talking about in terms of their development and their depth, but also there may be some guys coming off the radar that at some point may be bigger players than we think, because they have the gruesome twosome in the middle already. Like, how cool is it, or not? That's not the right word. How interesting is it for you that you can have a Nash and a Ty, but then you've got a host of folks that are vying for playing time that you could actually see playing for this team along the D-line?
Well, I mean, I personally love it, because that's the whole concept of what you're trying to build here. The idea is that when you lose Nash and Ty, that you have ready-made replacements that can step in, that you don't have this massive drop-off. The idea of it is that if one of those guys were to get hurt, you're going to have someone who can step in and at least give you a portion of that production. And it's usually more than just one. I mean, they have some guys that they really like. Brody Tagaloa comes to mind. Tua Lafotu comes to mind. Obviously, I talk about Riley Van Poppel every chance that I get, but I think that's a name that people, I don't know that would come from nowhere, but they've done a really nice job going back to when they got here of emphasizing this defensive line room. And then look at kind of the classes they put together of these players. They have really overhauled that defensive front, and they've done it in a way where it feels like they have people that are going to be ready to step right in whenever Nash and Ty have to come off the field, whether it's because they need a breather, whether it's to keep them fresh later in the game, whether it's because they're hurt, or next year when they're not on the team. So I think the depth that they built on this defensive line, it goes all the way back to looking at how they first came in and started recruiting and just grabbing different players. And I don't know what Vincent Carroll Jackson's going to be in terms of this upcoming season, but that's a guy that they put a lot of work in the offseason. He was one of the early leaders when they were doing their point system of offseason work guys. And that's a guy that, a year down the line could be a breakout player for Nebraska when he gets a chance to really sink his teeth into a role. But right now, you're able to just kind of give him a little bit here, a little bit there, get him on the field for a series here. Like, they're able to get players' feet wet without disrupting the flow of the defense, and no one has to take a step back. That's the sort of development that we've been sitting and screaming about for about a decade now. Like, this is of the position you can see it easily.
Yeah, we didn't even bring up Cam, who now can play on the in the interior now as well as on the edge, and I can't wait till everybody. So if you're looking for an all transformation of a guy that was already
Jamari Butler,
100%. Jamari Butler, I don't know if it's probably good genetics. I'm sure Kristen Coggins and a lot of Corey Campbell, but it's when everybody gets a chance to see him, he will be the guy that everybody talks about in terms of his frame. He looks like $1 million.
Yeah, he's the guy that I wish was in Indy, but the thing is that I have a difficulty. It's not like there's an easy one to replace. I think the other three that are going all make sense.
He's got an personality too.
Yeah, if they were sending someone else, Jamari Butler would be the first choice that I have. I think he is a leader on that team. I think he's a leader on that defense. I think he is a good quote if you're in the media, so you're going to enjoy talking with him.
Coach Rule too, like they're kind of in a of each other.
And he's going to represent you in the way that you want. And so he's sort of the honorary. I kind of wish that he could be there, but yeah, I'm excited about Jamari Butler. I remember our conversation before the Minnesota game. We're up in the press box, and I'm asking you how you think things are going to go. And you're like, I'm a little worried. I think their best defensive player isn't playing tonight, and it's Jamari Butler. And they go out and they play fantastic on defense. And I'm thinking, okay, they're getting this guy in Colorado. This defense might have something here. And then he went on to lead the team in sacks. And I think he was second in tackles for a loss. And I mean, he was really impactful. But the thing is, there's another level that Jamari Butler can get to, and that would be a lot of fun if that comes together here in the 24 season.
Would you agree that probably Coach Dvorak, if you want to assess development, is the next step with the easy comps? I mean, he's got Bullock, he's got Wright, he's got Shavers Jr., who, by the way, I'd probably let get off the bus at the same neither one of those guys could get off at the same time with their shoulder width, but Shavers Jr. and Butler are probably the first two guys I would let get off the bus. Like, he seems like he has prime candidates for you to be able to say, you know what, that guy is really, really good at his craft.
The difference for Dvorak and Knighton, though, is that he doesn't have Henrich or Reimer. So it's going to be a lot more kind of, okay, let's see what this looks like. Like, let's see what Mekhi Bayer ultimately looks like. How can John Bullock raise his game from what we saw last year? What is Javen Wright, a fully healthy, went through spring? I mean, this is the longest stretch that Javen Wright's been healthy for a long time, too.
Since he's been in Lincoln.
And that's a guy that we've kind of been waiting. And he had a very good year last year, but kind of similar to Jamari Butler. Like, there's another level to Javen Wright. He can be that much more explosive. You're talking about Vincent Shavers. You know, he's one of these freshmen that we already are expecting to – there's going to be no red shirt. Like, he's going to play more than 4 games.
Yeah,
and so with that group –
loves that guy.
Yeah. With that group, a lot of it is I'm like excited to see that in those first 3 games in the non-conference, because I think they have a lot of mix and match that you can do with that linebacking group, where you can get different, assets on the field in terms of their skill set and kind of let them go to work against what another offense is attempting to do.
Yeah, can you imagine if we got 19 in the first half against Minnesota, what we could possibly get to against UTEP this year?
We feel way better about the depth now.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm looking for a lot of people to play that day. If Nebraska handles their business, that needs to be a flood the bench. Everybody gets a participation, one game played next to their name there.
Dave, so another guy that Knighton talked about, we're talking about guys that might kind of break out like Jamari Butler. The one that he brought up specifically as kind of a game changer was Princewell. Were you kind of surprised at all to hear him talk kind of just so openly about his expectations for Princewell, or are you like, yeah, that's just kind of what it needs to be?
No, I'm not surprised. I think if you were around last spring, or if you were paying attention to how they talked about him as a true freshman, this was a guy that I think they were surprised how quickly he came in, picked things up, how hard he works. They love that family. Start there. They love the person that he is as much as it is a player. His development, I think, was just arrow up from day one. And he's someone I think they trust a lot, too. And a lot of it was, we're going to get another year. Corey Campbell is going to be able to put some more weight on him. He's going to retain that explosiveness. He has a chance to be a special player.
And I think he's got two good shoulders now, too. So,
yeah. I think this is a guy that they – we talk about breakout. Like, this is someone that in a year they're going to be relying on as one of the key guys in their defense. Like, this year, he doesn't have to be a key guy, but he can play his way into that role. But the expectation is by 25, like, that is one of your studs on defense. I really feel that's how they are over there when it comes to Princewell.
With just the names that you mentioned, and there's one more in the discussion, and I'll just include him in this deal. When you talk about the most natural of the young guys of the linebacking core, I would go with Princewell, James Williams, and Shavers Jr. That guys that just naturally, when you watch them play, you're like, ooh, that's a really, really high ceiling.
Yeah, well, James Williams,
like just naturals.
Yeah, James Williams played in 3 games last year, and we can't stop talking about what it's going to look like to see.
Well, he got out of bed being able to rush the passer.
Yeah, well, around here, that's going to earn you a lot of credit and a lot of platitude. How often do we talk about Nebraska's inability to get after the quarterback in the last 7 years? It's been a pretty heavy topic of conversation. That guy played in 3 games and had as many hurries as I think the entire 2017 season.
Schaefer is that's yeah.
You like that?
Yeah, that got me to go.
You caught me off guard a little bit.
That's a good pull.
I was about to ask a question. I was like, wait, I have to process that for a second. Last defensive lineman I want to talk about is, a guy that's been talked about quite a bit, and I've talked about him quite a bit, but we also heard Knighton mention him. He called Nash Hutmacher a unicorn, and then mentioned the fact that he had dropped 25 pounds. He called him a unicorn last year at 335. Like, I'm insistent that weight is going to make a huge difference in the disruption we see from Nash. Is that kind of how you're viewing this as well in light of Knighton's comments?
Yeah, for me, a lot of it is like, what does this guy look like after he just went through an off season where he was a wrestler? He, has transformed his body. He basically went to hand-to-hand combat for an entire off season. Like, I don't know. I am excited to see what he can do in that defensive line. And at the same time, if he can just replicate what he was last year, then the rest of the defense continues to fill in and go up around him. Nebraska's in such a prime position in the middle of their defensive line. Part of why their 3-man front has struggled so much in recent years is you haven't had this kind of guy that can space eat. He can force teams to take multiple, offensive linemen to try to block him. He's a special talent. There's no question that he's a unicorn. But the nice thing is they're doing a good job already trying to line guys up to get reps. So they know they have to replace him. And you can't just replace him with one guy. But if you have a couple in there for next year, that'll be good.
I don't know if I'll be texting you on the road just to talk about the Vikings, or I'll wait till next week. But we're gonna be picking your brain about the NFL coming up here soon too. So be prepared.
It sounds good. I'll throw my Sam Darnold jersey on and hopefully don't see any ghosts.